one of the things, and it's probably most relevant today because this is the day when Jabril Cox officially became a member of the LSU Tigers. Jabril Cox, of course, the All-America linebacker from North Dakota State, who won national championships each of his years there at North Dakota State. He officially signed his letter with LSU today. So 6'3", 233 out of Kansas City, went to North Dakota State. Now today, officially an LSU Tiger. Now, Bo couldn't talk specifically about Jabril Cox when he was on with Hester because the letter hadn't come in yet. But here was Bo Pelini talking about the linebacker group earlier today.
Yeah, Marcel's playing Will. He's playing like the weak side linebacker. Him and Micah Baskerville. But our guys are pretty interchangeable. I mean, our Mike right now is Damone Clark, who I think he's going to be. I'm real excited about him. Ray Thornton has moved back. He's playing competing with Damone for that spot. And I like our group. We have. Jared Smalls, he's a walk-on kid from in town who I think's a talented kid, tough. And, I'm just kind of getting to know all these guys. Devontae Lee moved over to linebacker, and he's just kind of getting his feet wet. And then we have some other guys coming in. We got a couple more walk-ons who will help us on special teams and such. And I like the group.
All right, so while you don't get too deep into the depth chart, some have asked, and someone asked me this question this morning specifically, where does Jabril Cox play in this defense? Is he your Mike, or is he your Will, your middle or your weak side linebacker? Well, what you just heard from Bo there is you got Damone Clark as the Mike with Ray Thornton backing him up, and he's got Marcel Brooks and Micah Baskerville at the Will on the weak side. So understand physically what you're talking about. Now, he did say they're interchangeable, and it is worth noting that Jacoby Stevens is probably in a 3-safety looking to kick down and play some outside linebacker. So we'll get to that in just a second. But just think about what Bo Pelini wants, okay? Marcel Brooks is listed at 6'2", 194. He's at the Will. 6'2", 194. The other one who they love, and you ask anyone around there, they'll tell you, it's Micah Baskerville. And you heard Bo Pelini mention Baskerville there. Baskerville is at 6'1", 228. So a little bit thicker than Marcel Brooks, but both guys are similar. That sort of tall, lean, long-armed guy can get off the edge. He said his starting Mike, his middle linebacker, Damone Clark. 6'3", 239. Being backed up by Ray Thornton, who's 6'3", 227. You look at Jabril Cox, 6'3", 229. Where do you think Bo is envisioning Jabril Cox playing? A big veteran linebacker that you can stick in the middle of your defense and make all the calls. I mean, think about some of the linebackers that he had in his time in Baton Rouge, even the All-American who was there in the national championship season, in Ali Highsmith. Big, strong against the run, but athletic enough to defend to the sidelines. It just makes so much sense that it's Jabril Cox. Now, that he plays in the Mike. Now, what do you do with Damone Clark? Well, then maybe you move him to the strong side, and you could keep Brooks on the weak side. Or, as he said there, they're interchangeable, but it makes too much sense to have a guy that is a starter, 100-tackle guy, All-American, that is coming in as a plug-and-play guy. You get him on the field in the middle of your defense and say, go be our 100-tackle guy in the middle of this defense, make all the calls, and be our guy who's stout up the middle. Now, what does that mean for Jacoby Stevens? And I'll get to the defensive line in a second, but a lot have asked about Stevens and where he plays. And I agree that I think Jacoby Stevens does play more of a linebacker-type hybrid role. Here's what Bo Pelini said on how Stevens fits the system.
I mean, I think Jacoby Stevens, first of all, I think the same thing. He's a leader. He's a smart football player. He's versatile. I can't say enough about him. I mean, I think Jacoby's going to be a guy that, I see him as being able to do so many different things. Yes, blitzing. He can play deep. He can play close to the line of scrimmage. He's going to be a guy that the NFL is just going to – they're going to be standing in line to try to get this guy on their football team because he can do so many different things. And he's tough, he's physical, he's smart. He's got a lot of potential, and I'm excited to work with Jacoby. He fits our system really well.
And remember, Todd Harris coming off of injury, Maurice Hampton, who emerged late. That's 2 safeties plus Stevens. Those 2 guys back there, especially having Harris back, gives you the luxury of being more versatile with Stevens. Look, he showed you the athleticism with the interception against Mississippi State. You play him over the middle, and, I mean, out of nowhere, leapt and intercepted that ball. But you know he also is athletic enough to come off the edge and rush the passer. So whatever role you need him, he can play. But I think having that versatile chess piece on the board is super valuable. And it probably does mean you'll see Stevens at linebacker some in sort of that hybrid role. The other thing that is absolutely that's eye-catching is listening to Bo talk about Tyler Shelvin. So if you missed it last week, Pro Football Focus did their top returning players in college football by position. And number 6 at defensive tackle was Tyler Shelvin, the 6th best returning defensive tackle in the country. And remember, Shelvin only had 17 tackles a year ago. Not super productive in the sense of looking at the stat sheet, looking at a box score. But when you are the true nose, the zero technique in a 3-4, your job isn't to make a bunch of tackles. Your job is to eat up 2 or 3 blocks and to create havoc to free up those linebackers to go make plays. That's why you see guys like Jacob Phillips have a 100-tackle season and Patrick Queen and all those guys running around making all the plays. Well, now you're changing it up. You're going 4-3. Now it's, hey, Hoss, we need you to be a dominant, disruptive force. And this was such an interesting comparison when Bo Pelini mentions this.
Tyler Shelvin, I think he can be as good as he wants to be. I think he's a really talented kid, and I'm excited about him. He does some things now. He's way bigger than Glenn was at this time, at this point in his career. But there are times when you see that 72, and I see him doing some things. He reminds me of Dorsey.
I know. Yeah.
And he's just about probably 70 pounds bigger than what Glenn was at that point.
They've got Tyler Shelvin listed at 6'3", 346. Now, if Tyler Shelvin is 346, then I weigh $105. Okay. But ultimately, you're talking about 2 guys that are built very differently. I remember the story about Glenn whenever he went to the Kansas City Chiefs, and there was a write-up from a Chiefs beat reporter, couldn't believe, post-game, of course, there's open locker rooms in the NFL, and Glenn Dorsey walked in, coming out of the shower, was barefoot, couldn't believe that Glenn Dorsey was eye-to-eye with him at 6 foot. And so Glenn was not a super tall, long, but he was just an athletic freak in the middle at that size that could blow up plays. I am fascinated with this defense to see. I think getting Jabril Cox alleviates any questions I had about linebacker. With Jabril Cox, Damone Clark, Micah Baskerville, Marcel Brooks, you've got guys that have been on the field, and you have now your productive superstar that takes so much of the pressure off the other guys. The biggest question for me is shifting guys from a 3-4, which you've recruited for, on the defensive line, now to a 4-3, and you're asking your defensive linemen to do very different things. So how does Tyler Shelvin do when you're saying, hey, Hoss, I need you to go make plays. I need you to get in the gap and blow people up instead of just eating up blocks. How does that go? That's going to be very interesting. But 7, please, Musso. Pelini talked about this, about those guys switching techniques from a 3-4 to a 4-3.
Yeah, I mean, we have guys that can play, and technique's technique. We don't coach. I don't coach we don't coach a zero nose any different than we coach. You put a guy head up. You're either playing a head up technique or you're playing a shade. It doesn't matter whether you're lined up on the center, the guard, the tackle. I mean, we coach it all pretty much the same, and I think it'll be good for these guys in some ways. For our defensive end, they're learning some different things. They're out there. They're not always going to be lined up in 4 eyes and that type of thing. And I'm hoping, and I think it'll prove to be so. I think we'll have a lot more effective 4-man rush.
I don't think there's any question about that, because that's the objective, is put in this. And maybe the thing that is for LSU the best about this switch is that is what the head coach wants. The head coach is a defensive line coach by trade who grew up in a 4-3, and he wants defensive linemen that are athletic freaks that are disruptive. That's what Ed Ogeron wants because that's what he's always been around. How often do we hear Ed talk about coaching Warren Sapp at Miami or his days at USC and guys like Leonard Williams? That's what he wants. He wants defensive linemen that are going to be All-Americans that blow up plays. He's going to have a shot with this defense. And that synergy with the head coach, defensive coordinator, coaching the same thing and wanting the same thing, it's not to say that Dave Aranda wasn't brilliant. He was. Dave was great. But Dave and Ed had different philosophies about defense. Now, the head coach and defensive coordinator very much singing the same tune.